Welcome to Technology and Security. TS is a podcast exploring the intersections of emerging technologies and national security. I'm your host, Dr. Miah Hammond-Errey. I'm the founding CEO of Strat Futures Proprietary Limited and an adjunct associate professor at Deakin University. My guest today is Aurélie Jacquet. Thanks for joining me, Aurélie.
Absolute pleasure to be on the podcast, Miah. Thank you for inviting me.
Aurélie is a leading global expert in AI ethics and governance. She specialises in standards and the implementation of responsible and safe AI. She's currently the CEO of Ethical AI Consulting, where she advises organisations, including Fortune 500 and ASX 20 companies, on the safe and responsible implementation of AI technologies. She's advised in Australia and globally on pretty much every AI committee that matters. Too many to list them all. For example, she's an OECD AI expert, chair of Australia's ISO AI Standards Committee, and advises New South Wales and the Australian federal government. She speaks globally and has won countless awards and been recognised extensively for her leadership in responsible AI. We're coming to you today from the lands of the Gadigal people. I pay my respects to elders, past, present and emerging, and acknowledge their continuing connection to land, sea and community. As an advisor to top Fortune 500 and ASX companies, do you have any insights into the trends when it comes to actual productivity gains?
Yes. Before I jump in, I also acknowledge the elders, past, present and future. We have some amazing leaders from this community into AI and just wanted to say thank you to all of them for the great work that they do. Okay, leaders and productivity on AI. AI is a tool, so if you don't know how to use it, you will not be productive. If you know how to use it cleverly, this is not changing. It's always the same challenge. You need to be very mindful and understand how it can work for you. So we see it used well and getting gains when you use it for fraud, for example, or for specific supply chain or processes. Excellent result also for monitoring devices like a railway or train. And the reason for that is one, you've got really good data that doesn't change all the time. And then you have very clear process. So the upshot of this is you need really good data. You need to go have really good process. Then you can actually make sense of them and optimize them with AI. That's what's really key.
What are some of those best practices that companies you've worked with have focused on?
Very recently, I worked with two big companies on the best practice. With AWS, they published a Responsible AI Lens, which identifies a specific best practice that a team, like a product team with the builders, should take when building an AI system. And what you see, it starts from a use case. You can't just build AI without having a specific use case in mind. And it's not any use case. You need to understand whether this is the appropriate use case by effectively looking at what's a legal requirement. Like 3/4 of the incidents that we see when using AI, it's because they didn't understand the requirement of the product or the services that they were developing. So that's absolutely key to things. Then what data do you have? Can you enhance the data? Can you acquire the data that's necessary for that use case? And third, really, do people need that service? Will that help them? Does that work in their workflow? We see in hospital that we deliver more system one after the other, and they're just not adopted because it's just one of a bad design after the other. With the AWS Responsible AI Lens, you'll see the first one is definitely define your use case. And that's what I see time and time again where it's failed. It's just poor choice in use case, going for something that's where you will not meet the requirement with AI, or you don't have the data, or it will not fill the need. That's, again, an old problem, but that's very pertinent to any of those AI systems. Then I also help, it's been published this year. It was a CBA transparency report where CBA explained their best practice. What was great about this report is it's actually showing what a leading company in Australia is doing with AI. You know, I've been super passionate about making sure that Australians have a voice globally and show what they do, because I get the question all the time, are we behind? We just don't know yet. There's actually people here that are doing amazing work. The report actually show organization what it means to do AI and Gen AI well. And so you see with CBA, they actually show that in their report, they've been in the conversation from the day go. And it's incremental change that they need to make to adapt to the latest technology. And that's a faster way to adopt the technology. If you say, I'll wait to see what regulations are coming, I'll wait for the latest technology, it's going to be such a hard time to catch up. What's important with CBA is you see they give you good example of where it works. And you don't need to start with groundbreaking application first. You need to start with what you know best, because you know where the problems are and you know where are the benefits. So that's why for CBA, like you had a good fraud example, or like we've been experimenting with chatbots. So again, this is where the learning happens. And effectively, that's why they say their policy is iterative. You mentioned monitoring. I think no one should deploy AI system if they're not monitoring it.
Can you give us a little bit more about that? I mean, obviously that Commonwealth Bank report shows that AI is being considered across the whole life cycle of their operations. They've not just added it on, but they've actually thought about it through that process. And when we think about monitoring things, a critical element of that is being able to evaluate how successful something is and then feed that lesson back into the system. What have you been seeing?
I'll give you some, it's a long story, try to make it as short as possible. I come from capital markets where I was managing as a compliance function algorithmic traders. I had the opportunity to do that for GFC. Algorithmic trader could be the beginning of AI. What happened there is if you don't monitor the way your algorithm evolve on the market and you let it do well, I only let you go back into the past and figure out what happened. I work with ISO. I'm the Australian head of delegation. So what we did there, with Australia, we shaped international best practice. There's now one standard that we have that tells you what are the key controls that you need to have for your AI system. And while in financial services, because we had model for markets and we were already using model, we know that you need to monitor those models. For most organizations, this is brand new. You released a product and they were just, you get customer feedback. But this is no longer working when the change with, again, AI or with AI, like the very beginning, the performance was dropping. So you needed to know why and when the performance was dropping, and that's why you were monitoring. So you know you had to retrain. You see they retrain regularly, so they adapt, but you need to see that they, again, not they're adapting the way you want, or like each time there's a change, that it's still performing as they should. They have a great advantage. They're much more dynamic, so they can adapt. But equally, because they adapt, you need to manage them accordingly. So that's why I say if there's one thing you need to do, it's monitor, monitor, monitor. Also, it will help you with the incidents, because with AI, again, any of those products, what they do, they automate, right? So if you automate something, it makes you make it at scale. If it's at scale, there's incidents at scale. So back to my GFC comparison, in that world, what we need is a fail-safe. So effectively, you have a way to manage the algorithm and replace it by something that's safer. And that's why monitoring is absolutely key. Why am I saying monitoring is key? Because it's a lesson from the past that's applied very much to all the AI system. And we've seen there's some absolute great work that I've helped out with the OECD on, and there's also standards coming in on incident management for AI system.
Can't help but think about algorithms going wild, going rogue. I want to pivot.
I'll pick you up on that. You know, that's something we saw in markets, right? What happened is with algorithm, you had different algorithms that were playing each other, but in markets, it's traceable. So you can see. So now when we have agents, this is the same principle. It's not different from what we saw in capital market. It's just you have agents that will push each other, like in the markets. If you decide to have an agent that buy an amount of X at this price, the other agent that you do not see will push the price, and suddenly you will you'll increase your price of your favorite tennis shoes. So what happened in market is what's happening with AI and with AI agents. So that's predictable. The challenge is none of this is visible in real life.
Yeah. Especially when you're talking about things like dynamic pricing or situations that you as a consumer can't see the processes happening.
So in capital market, it's all digitized. Like when they were doing trade manually, it was harder to do. Now it's all digitized, so you could see who's pushing what. We have some clear rules about what you should do and should not do. And if you cannot justify why your algorithm in markets did this trade, let's say you're going to have a few questions from the regulators. So that's markets. Now, let's move to the AI world. There's some strong similarities here, and that's why you see globally what's happening is a focus on transparency and audit. It's because why do we ask for a register? It's we need to know what are the AI system, what they're doing, how they're interacting with each other. It says that in order to manage all the bots and make sure there's no illegal activity, you would just have a way to record the interaction and actually justify the interaction. And that's where the register and those push for transparency and regulation are coming through right, left, and center.
So do you think algorithmic transparency then is important in regulation? Because some aspects of that are going to be IP protected and some are going to be shared with some people like regulators. But then in things like social media, you can also think maybe people want a certain level of algorithmic transparency over how their feed might be curated or how they might be shown things. So there's different situations might require different kind of elements of transparency.
We had this again in the past. No algo traders will give you ever the underlying model that they built. There was one of the exchange tried that way back, was never successful. There's good reason for that. So you're never going to be able to do that here. However, when it comes to transparency, there's two types of transparency. Is like you see, we have data card, model cards. These are useful registers of the capability, what they can and cannot do. It's very likely the users, because when I say the users, you have those what we call big tech, but we also have the users that use the AI for specific application. They will have to provide a level of transparency to see what they do with those bots in order to understand any change in our market. So that's one side of the transparency for the regulator to understand what's happening and to be able to pick up on the activity that breaches the law. The different piece is transparency is very specific. I completely agree with you. I will never advocate to have a one-size-fits-all. I've done lots of work on transparency. And again, it depends on the use case. So we've learned, at least from the privacy notice, we should definitely not do privacy notice with a long text. I can say that in my mind is not helping nor the customer nor the company. What we do is being able to articulate the benefits and also being able to articulate the harm that can happen. So that's the first step.
How technically literate do boards need to be now? Another way of putting it might be, what does meaningful AI oversight require from directors?
For the lawyers, like I used to be a litigator, we used to get very quick into any matter and being experts at any matter that been thrown at us, whether it was a case about learning about all aviation rules, or I remember one case was about construction, how you actually had to construct the tower. All these are very vastly different. The board, they really need to, right now, be able to have that litigation mind and ask the right question. That's absolutely key. I think first there's a reassurance message that no one knows a business better than they do. So they know what use case are working, what challenge they have. That's one. So that's something that should reassure them when AI, you put a tool in there, right? However, this tool is going everywhere right now. So, and that's a challenge. And because it's proliferating everywhere, everyone's trying, there's a big push for AI. For directors and boards is, how do I keep on top of this? How do I make sure that the use are appropriate for my company's strategy? And I guess it's back to, one, you need to understand the basic of the technology. It's probably good that you have a specific person on the board that helps with the responsible AI piece or the AI piece altogether, because they can keep you abreast of all this change faster. And it's not been like a new thing now. There's enough evidence for like people on the ground that have been in there on AI and responsible AI. They know that it's not brand new anymore, that there are pieces you absolutely need to have in place. So long story short, you do need a certain technical level of expertise, but you need to think like a good director, like the way you do as usual, and be able to ask the right question. Do not be scared of the technology. So the hardest thing in the AI world is the hype, the nudges, the being fed different pieces. The ecosystem is very fragmented, very noisy. So it's being able to find the right advisor or the right person on the board that know who to trust or what are the source to trust. And then keeping the good knowledge, understanding that when we had computers coming in, right, you still need to understand about how a laptop works. Like, you just can't ignore it. It's the same for agentic AI. It'll go and feed and it'll automate some task. So you'll need to understand how this works and ask the right question.
Do you think there's a risk boards are underestimating systemic risk dimensions because AI is being framed primarily as an opportunity?
I'd like to think that 2026 is when governance is pretty much the new black. Because, as you say, we have, there's been so much push for AI. You have to do AI adoption, scale, scale, scale. I think we see article every so often just saying, I think one of the consulting firms say, if you don't use AI, well, you will be out. I think the real trouble right now is you need to think about using AI, but if your governance function and your compliance function doesn't understand how to risk manage it, if you don't have the controls in place at that level, well, then good luck scaling it.
What are some of the interdependencies and vulnerabilities between AI and security or society that you wish were better understood?
So my biggest peeve about AI is effectively we're always trying to reinvent the wheel. Like, we started with ethical AI, responsible AI, trustworthy AI, safety in AI. So each time we try to reinvent the wheel when it's not changing. I was looking at IP incident, bias incident, reliability incident back in 2018. So that were already the challenge.
I was going to ask you about all those terms: trustworthy, safe AI, responsible AI, ethical AI. I mean, they keep proliferating. Do you have a prediction for this year? Not a serious question. But I mean, I do want to know, how is it just a reinvention of the wheel? Why are these terms, for people that are not in it every day, why are there all these different terms? Because there's some politics to it.
Definitely. So this term is changing as we see the evolution of the thinking and the learning. So ethics was like aspiration, we had goal, we had principles, right? Then responsible AI, we just started to see some incident. So it was a good way to say the organization. No one wants to regulate the tech, but you need to be responsible. So start thinking about the incident, and he has a piece and some general guidance. And now we're going into safety, because we see as effectively we embedding more and more the system into our day-to-day lives. Safety becomes primordial. But they're all very interconnected. In our world, on the ground, when you implement, they're very interconnected. You need to have safety to effectively act responsibly, and you need, where you can, you try to act ethically. So, for example, for bias, right? You have you need to be safe, make sure it doesn't hurt or harm anyone. When you have data that's when you don't have, no one has a complete data set, so your data will never work perfectly. So what are the trade-offs that you can make safely? And to the extent you can, you will enhance the data to make sure that it actually not just comply with the law, but satisfy and help and provide, let's say, a result as equal as possible for all. So that's where you put safety, responsibly, and ethically together. And because you've put the right control into this AI system, you make the system trustworthy. That's how it all comes together. Trust is impossible to manage. Everyone has a different way of trusting things. There's an excellent NIST report that got pulled down, but still you can access it, about trustworthy AI and trust in AI, and pretty much explaining that what we can do is we can make the right step to enable trust, but we will not be able ever to get anyone to guarantee trust. And the UK has done also lots of good work on that, on explaining that what we're after is justified trust. And that's why I am working in the field of certification. So you certify that AI system have the right control in place. And that's where you have, you know for sure, and people can make their mind up whether they want to use it or not. Actually, what I wanted to say is we see lots of horizontal regulation, and security is a perfect example of it. I like some aspect of the UI Act, but the fact that they come horizontal regulation makes it very difficult to implement when there already other legislation in place. And we see this friction happening right now. So for security is a perfect example where effectively at the very beginning, when we were looking at just when AI was coming in the market, security professionals were only looking at protecting the data. Now you need to protect the model. What we are doing with AI, we are effectively uplifting existing practice and improving them so that they are fit for AI. And security is a great example to show that. What we've also done and learned from security is that there's a standards that I'm going to quote. It's called ISO 27001. Only the standards people know it, but pretty much every company, organization, when you want to effectively sell to that company or organization, as part of their procurement, they say, are you ISO 27001 compliant? So it sets the standards for what security process you need to have in place, and that's recognized international best practice. I'd love people to know, what I really, really like them to realize is we've done that for AI. We have, again, that's standards, ISO 42001, that we built and shaped so that effectively it can be part of the procurement process and help vet those best practice. And the beauty, it actually works together with the cybersecurity because it has to be building blocks. We can't just put AI practices on top of in its silo and ignore everything else. So it really needs to build on top of privacy practices, security practices, risk management practices, compliance.
In 5 years, what is the AI conversation we'll regret not having had today?
For me, for Australia, is we need to be part of the international ecosystem. That's always been my push. That's why I'm part of the OECD. That's why I'm part of ISO. So the conversation is we should have not a view about Australian regulation and best practice and risk management. We need to look broader than that because this is a supply chain. Despite the friction that happened all around the world right now, we globalize data. We saw that with privacy. We see that for cybersecurity. We saw this with COVID. Australia is no longer an island at the bottom of the map. It is very much technology brought us all way close together. And what that means is our regulation, our compliance, our best practice are intertwined. And that's where we need to be part of those international conversations. We need to have those international conversations in Australia. And we cannot be a taker. We need to shape. Otherwise, it's going to be very, very challenging. And you see, I have to give it to the e-safety commissioner. She is doing an amazing job getting those conversations internationally.
The pod is a fan of Julie. She's been on the show. We love her too. So let's go to the contest spectrum. What is a cooperation, competition, or conflict you see coming this year?
It's all three. So I talked about AI safety. So you have what's called frontier models that are the top. So the frontier model piece is going to come a lot more forward this year. We see already the EU is looking at frontier model early this year. Frontier model are models that are extremely capable. So for those model, we're starting to think about safety, what it looks like. And I'm not talking about AGI. I am personally not a believer in AGI. So, but we're starting to think for those, there's research, lots of research done through the Safety Institute. How do you manage those risks? And that's really great work. But then how do you reconcile it with the work that's done on the ground, day to day, with the people that do risk management? And I think at the moment, what we have here is, as you say, a little bit of a conflict between what's safety. It's different from risk management from the research side. So you see the conflict between the two. I'd like to think they're going to be a cooperation.
I'm going to go to a new segment. What should we stay focused on, connected to, and grounded in this year to keep sane amid the chaos?
That's not from me, but it was so good. It's going to be everyone's competing for your attention, everything, every algorithm. So for me, it's two things, and I haven't mastered them. Cognitively blocking what's not of interest, being able to shift what's of no interest. And so to manage your workload, there's so many headlines. Everything is geared to nudge you or to grab your attention. That's the reward. Your reward is your attention. So you need to protect it because that's what keeps you sane.
So I want to go to some of the government and policy questions. What do you see as the best mechanisms that governments can use to inform themselves on tech and AI policy with being able to harness genuine expertise, whether that's technical or otherwise?
I've done work for the European Commission way back. They gathered a group of experts to understand effectively how different policy were shaping around the world on AI. Did that a while back. It was called EU AI Outreach. And it was me and my colleagues, we all brought different reports and different aspects to the Commission. I think that was a valuable exercise to help the Commission understand, to my point, how the world is shaping, not within just one country. And you see those patterns repeating again to actually bring experts that know deeply how to manage and have worked in AI for a long time. And even for the expert, it's been helpful working together because often we pinged against each other. So one, like you get an advice from somewhere, an advice from other, to have us in the room and to be able to advocate in a friendly manner and understand the difference in where everyone come forward, just move us to the conclusion a lot faster. This is something that's worked well at the federal level when we had the 12 experts from the federal government. And this is also something that has worked well and is working well with the New South Wales AI assessment committee that I'm part of too.
What are some of the most underappreciated strategic risks of AI for government right now in 2026?
Nudging and oversight. There's always technology. When you use technology, there's always over trust. It's always been like that. It's not new with AI. Again, like as I said, for me, I'm definitely not trying to reinvent the wheel, but you see it with AI. I think there's many cases where there were basic algorithms that were used, quoting Eliza, for example, as like that was a very old chatbot that was providing advice from a psychology perspective. People were trusting it extremely. So you have that, an extreme trust in technology. I did say AI is just a tool, but maybe the one time I was wrong is when I say it's not going to change our society so much. NLP. So when you use word, we use word to convince people. That's a way we communicate. So it's very powerful, much more powerful than we think. To have the right words and being able to place them can convince someone and get them to be the happiest person or the most miserable person. So again, with this power of being able now, making everyone capable to choose very powerful word and to nudge people, to push them one way or another without really understanding, having visibility on how the nudge are made.
I've written a lot from a security lens on what I've called an information ecosystem of malign influence and interference. So foreign interference, whether it's algorithmic control, nudging towards behavior. So I'm really interested in hearing you say this because I think it's challenging from a democratic point. I think it's challenging from an electoral point, but I also think it's challenging from a polarizing, inciting people to violence, foreign interference. Like this ecosystem is actually about influence. And, to your point about attention, it's also about intention.
And again, we were talking about this in 2018. The first one that came to me and asked about this back then were startups, because when they were building projects or products with AI, they were just going, can I actually make this recommendation? Will it be safe? So from, recommendation to eat something or not, like as part of a health app, there's many impacts that you can have on the person without understanding. Equally, we saw for lending, that some people, they really don't like to see 5 screen. They just want to see 1. Others want to see 10. But so all are nudges, and we're being nudged more and more. Before, you had to fill a form, you had friction.
And I think one of the key challenges for organizations is that AI is just reducing that friction. It's reducing the friction for the individual to make an error, particularly in terms of like cybersecurity, phishing, deepfakes, so on. But it's reducing friction across the board in our whole life.
And back to your point, then it makes it very, very hard to make a decision and to challenge the algorithm. I always thought, way back when I was getting into AI, I always had this in mind. So as a litigator, you had to produce an advice and say, look, you have 80% chance of winning. And some of the pro bono legal centers, they do that. But imagine if everyone's got an AI system that tells them, well, for this case, you've got 1% chance. Everyone sees that you have 1% chance of winning. What's the incentive of taking that case? So in law, obviously, you have an equity problem because then that's a challenge. But you see, how can you actually challenge the AI decision? And that's where the idea of oversight is a bit fraught, because at the beginning we say, oh, you need human oversight. And it's not possible to have human oversight always, like nuclear aviation. You need to be careful where you put and how you put human oversight. So nudging plus oversight. How do you get good oversight from people and accountability when they're being nudged every day and when they don't know what they can trust or who they can trust?
And what can government do? How can they start to think about that problem, even acknowledging that we're being nudged in almost every digital aspect of our life?
I think there's some good effort that are underway. It's before we were nudged in a different way, but this one's like AI is always a scale problem. So there's very good way you can do it. It's understanding what you use it, getting people to have time to think. So that's probably about the workforce and how that's a bigger issue and that's a separate issue. But thinking how you allow your workforce to detach itself and have some thinking time and challenging the observation that they see. So that's a balance that needs to be done. There's no perfect answer yet. Internationally, we're doing some work on human-computer interface to understand how you can assess the reliability of the response, but also of the human and the interaction. So that's at the beginning.
I want to go to a segment on alliances. What are some of the key alliances in AI and governance that we need to be focused on right now?
One interesting one that's coming and that I'm very happy about is insurance and responsible AI.
Tell us more.
So far, insurers have not provided specific insurance for AI. It's silent at the moment. There's some noise that this may change. If it's changing because AI is bringing its sets of challenge and the insurers are looking at how to manage the risk, then you'll see an uptake like that. You see some insurance companies insurers that are already looking at what are the frameworks that are helpful in managing those risks. So the alliances is effectively, if this alliance comes through, it looks like your responsible AI best practice could be rewarded by effectively having the right insurance in place and having the insurance if you have those practices in place.
Politics is obviously particularly relevant to AI, given that the infrastructure is largely centralized in two major jurisdictions. And we operate in an environment of fairly persistent state-linked cyber activity and AI threats, not from the same jurisdictions. But, not every AI incident is geopolitical and not every vulnerability is strategic competition. How should governments and organizations interpret tech infrastructure and state-based threats without over-securitizing everything?
It's understanding your strengths and what you want to protect, right? So the one piece I've got in mind is the data assets. I guess this is what's happening with agents. How do you protect, as a company, your data assets? But as a country, in one of the organizations we were working, we were starting to look at data exchange and understanding, having a good record of Australian data set. And that's where our value is and what we need to protect effectively. So I can't speak for the whole stack but if I have to think about what we would need to protect from my perspective come from the privacy world. So our quality Australian data. And we see that happening in Europe, where effectively they look at creating European data sets, so data exchange that allows for the country to use the data, but also to manage the access to that data. So I think that's where the value lies for us, because just like any company or at the government level, if you give your data away and anyone can use it, then you're losing a little bit or a lot. You could be losing quite a lot.
As we see, across that tech stack, and particularly like the infrastructure of AI and frontier models, how does Australia acknowledge that we're a part of a global system? And at the same time, that global system is fragmenting. How do we continue to engage with it in a way that, as you say, protects our data, that helps us engage in that economy, and yet at the same time acknowledges that some of those shifts have the capacity to impact us more significantly and strategically later on?
You build bridges. That's all what I'm about. Like it's, I've never seen one country, like the world adopting one regulation ever. So here, what you want to do is everyone has different perspective. You need to be able to build a bridge between those different perspectives. I'll give you an example. In Australia, we were the first one that adopted, again, I'll talk to the standards because that's the easy part, and they promote interoperability. So we adopted it in Australia, and we had a chat with Singapore, and they were really interested in adopting it as a local standard. We had, in February last year, we had a session between Singapore and Australia where they actually launched the local adoption of the ISO standard, which means they have different regulation than us, but effectively both countries have ISO 42001 in common. So they agree on the key control that needs to be in place. So that's how we build bridges rather than just creating just pure friction and making it impossible to implement the stack. To that point again of adding something on top, right? We have to, with AI, you need to consider security, like that's back to the existing law. You've got quite a heavy stack for some organization to actually already play in. So on the cybersecurity, you've got many laws that applies across the world. So imagine for the AI's cybersecurity is primary, then you have data, and then you have the AI regulation. So that's three big blocks to manage. And that's why I think from my perspective, it's absolutely key that we start building those bridges, or at least for AI, because I've been on the receiving end of looking at the different privacy laws and how they interact. I'm not going even at the state level. And that makes it very hard to use the technology.
I want to go to a segment called Emerging Tech for Emerging Leaders. What do you see as the biggest shifts for leaders and leadership from emerging technologies like AI?
So for leaders, I think the biggest shift is to understand that AI is breaking all the silos. So that's while AI play an existing process, you'll have to be a lot faster. You can't do the process. You need time to think, but you can't keep the process the way they are. If a model is changing within its output within X amount of time, you can't have the rest of the enterprise not moving at the same speed. So that's one. I'll go back to accountability and effectively the managing the system. As there's more AI systems, there'll be more interdependency. So there's a really importance to understand and have a map of those model and those interdependencies. So speed and accountability, obviously accountability, you need to understand what's the dependency of your AI system and what's the dependency of the AI system on other system and on the people. And that's something particularly important, and effectively the way you make decision. How, again, back to what I was saying, taking that time to be able not to be nudged and make the decision. And for board directors, I think the one thing to keep in mind that's very topical at the moment, it's more very practical tips. There's a couple of court case that's happening in the US that pretty much are saying that the data that you have in those AI system is not privileged. So it means that if you talk to at the board level about a court case and you or talk with your legal advisor at the board level about the court case, these conversations are privileged normally. If you feed them in one shape or form into an AI system, it's not, or it's likely to be not if we were to follow the US decision. So for boards, if they think about AI notes, they should be very careful about which data is embedded in the AI system. And that's a very, very good and important point for boards to think about their data sets and their data quality and any data leakage that happen with AI. So the new business model with AI is, again, attention, but it's also data. So you have your own data. You want to keep that data, and that's protected and confidential and sometimes privileged. So protect that. That's going to be more important, especially with agents.
That is an incredibly important risk for people everywhere to be aware of, given the prevalence of audio to text transcripts, for example. I want to go to a segment called Let's Disconnect. How do you wind down and unplug?
It's been a little bit trickier lately. I do ocean swim. So I did the Cold Classic last Sunday. While there was a shark alert, I still was very... they didn't tell us, so we could keep going. And it was actually a very enjoyable swim. It's a good way for me to be disconnected and rearrange my thoughts. Actually, I've got the best ideas while I'm swimming.
Coming up is Eyes and Ears. What have you been reading, listening to, or watching lately that might be of interest to my audience?
I was in Korea late last year, 5 December. We had a big AI Standard Summit where we had quite a lot of good announcements. And just as I was not adapting with the jet lag, I was watching the NVIDIA announcement about effectively what we call physical AI. Again, not sure I like the term physical AI, but what it is, and that's exciting, it's having AI system helping with a digital twin. So what's really exciting is actually they refer it as physical AI. I'm not super happy with the term, but because it's not that explanatory, what it is using AI to build a perfect digital twin. So effectively helping with manufacturing. And once you understand how all your process and you can map your process well, then AI can help you with that. But what I see next is imagine if you can map your process, your risk management and other process, and being able, then you become, that exchange that I was discussing about, you able to create and see the interaction. You can train and test the interaction in a safe digital environment and see how it reacts. So those digital twins that are powered for AI can also help AI understand what's the limits and how to manage it better. So that's what I've found super exciting.
Okay, my final segment is Need to Know. Is there anything that I didn't ask that would have been great to cover today?
Something you didn't ask. Yes, when it comes to responsible AI, it's great to have an AI policy. It's the first step, but it's not the last step. So if you have an AI policy in place, but if you do not have a set of best practice that is implemented at the control level, you should not be scaling AI systems. So make sure you move from policy to best practice implementation through the AI system lifecycle. Otherwise, you're up for scaling your risk and having some difficulty moving to the next step of your AI deployment.
Aurélie, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been a real pleasure.
Yeah, always a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening to Technology and Security. I've been your host, Dr. Miah Hammond-Errey. This podcast is brought to you by Strat Futures. If there was a moment you enjoyed today or a question you have about the show, send an email to the address in the show notes. Please rate, review, and subscribe to help promote technology and security.